Part 2, Chapter 11, Instinct as a Revelation from God and a Guide to Health and Happiness. We have seen that there is a twofold life of the soul, which manifests itself in the two forms of conscious and unconscious mental action. The preconscious life and activity of the mind is seen in the building up of the organism and in carrying on all the physiological processes. These mechanical and geometrizing effects seem to be under the control and direction of the highest and most unerring intelligence, though acting unconsciously so far as our voluntary mental action is concerned. But all the instinctive actions of the mind belong to this region of our mental nature. There is a dignity and importance attached to these that have been but poorly appreciated in philosophy, in religion, and in the science of medicine. Instinct may be defined as an original impulse of the soul, impressed upon it by the author of our being toward a certain form of thinking, feeling, and acting. Hartmann, who represents the latest and, at the present time, is the most popular exponent of the idealistic philosophy of Germany, defines instinct to be acting in conformity with a purpose without any consciousness of that purpose. Archbishop Whately says, instinct is a blind tendency to some mode of action independent of any consideration on the part of the agent of the end to which the action leads. But in the phenomena of instinct we see an exhibition of the highest intelligence, and, though it may act without our volitions and even without our consciousness, it can with no propriety be called blind. Sir William Hamilton's definition of it is still worse. According to him, instinct is an agent which performs blindly and ignorantly a work of intelligence and knowledge. If this was true, the wonder is that it should make no mistakes, or if any, so few. Dr. Paley's definition of it is better, because blindness and ignorance are not attributed to it, but it is still defective. Instinct, he says, is a propensity prior to experience and independent of instruction. It is an inborn predisposition and tendency towards a given form of action by which God perpetually acts upon and in the human soul, and, when yielded to without obstruction and without any depraved perversion, leads us, by an unconscious thinking and by an intelligence originally and continually impressed upon the mind by the Father of spirits, unerringly in the right direction. It is not confined in its action to the wants and demands of the lower nature, but its influence is felt in the highest regions of our spiritual being. What we call conscience is only an instinctive recognition of what is right and wrong, accompanied by a divine impulse to do the one and refrain from the other, analogous to what occurs in all animals when they are seen spontaneously to reject in their food whatever would be injurious to them. This they do without any knowledge of the laws of physiological chemistry, which gives us light as to the adaptation of food to the needs of the animal economy. Appetency is an innate seeking for something, a desire or reaching out of the mind for that which will supply a conscious need. It is a prescription of what we call nature, which is only another name for the God-life within us, of what the mind and body require for their nourishment, their growth, and happiness. It relates more to the department of feeling than to that of pure intellect. If this department of our navuo could be relieved from the ban of a false theology and the unnatural system of ethics that grows out of it, and could become a subject of education as much as the reason and the memory are, it would become a guide in duty and morals far nearer infallibility than the mandates of popes or the decisions of ecclesiastical councils. If we derive our being from God, then the fundamental laws of our nature are expressions of the will of God, and our spiritual instincts have the sacredness of the utterances of Sinai. Either this or atheism is true. Instinct being an original and antenatal predisposition of mind toward a certain mode of action is as much a divine law in the human spirit as gravitation and chemical affinity are in the realm of external nature. A genuine instinct, not modified by a false education, is a revelation from God and a mode of knowing the divine will as much as is the Decalogue. Kant, with all his cold, intellectual skepticism, is compelled to exclaim, instinct is the voice of God. Hartmann, in his Philosophy of the Unconscious, attributes it to that mysterious power of the soul for which we have no name. In German, Hellsehen, in French, clairvoyance, which is considered by him as divine, as it transcends the ordinary conscious, voluntary powers of man. This takes it from the dunghill of total depravity and the compost heap of things rejected by an unreasoning theology and unnatural moral philosophy, which excludes God as an active and ever-operating force from human nature, and places it on a throne among the princes of the earth. It is no longer an outcast and a condemned and banished criminal driven into a hiding place, but it sits at the gate among the rulers of the land. The relation of this department of the soul to health is a most important one. No one will be disposed to deny that the almost uniform health of the lower animals, especially when their life has not been interfered with by man, is owing to their following the law of their nature and the guidance of their instincts. These are a pillar of a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, to lead them to the promised land of their highest destiny, the summuum animum of the animal soul. So, in human society, the highest state of health of mind and body will never be realized until our instinctive nature is allowed to have a voice in the regulation of our lives, and walk side by side and band in hand with our more fallible reason. Then every man's best physician will dwell in his own heart, and can be called from the divine depths of his own nature to prescribe for his bodily ills and mental ailments. Animals, when sick, are often observed to seek for plants, which when in health they reject as food. But in man there are all the instincts that there are in the lower orders, and these, when properly educated, would furnish a better treatment of disease than all the medical libraries of the world contain. In the preconscious region of the mind, there are spiritual instincts by which men are much more influenced than by their boasted reason. One of the deepest and divinest of these is the tendency of the human soul to return unto God, from whose being it issued into conscious individuality. As all rivers seek the ocean whence they came, and as Lyrae ascending seeks the sun, so all souls tend back toward their source. However far we may be removed from him by a voluntary or involuntary spiritual remoteness, which, in its essence, is a moral unlikeness to him, we shall by a divine elasticity inherent in all human souls, receive from the point of greatest distance and return to union with him. As instinctively as the newborn infant seeks the mother's breast, so the soul of man, when left to its own divine tendencies, and to the pressing nature of its inmost needs, is drawn to God to seek spiritual nutriment from the bosom of the infinite life. There is something in the soul, especially in the religious element, which is deep-seated in human nature, which spontaneously tends to vent itself in prayer and pour out itself in supplication to God. There is an instinct of worship. The history of the race proves this. The universal prevalence of some form of adoration can be accounted for only in this way. It is an instinctive movement of the divine life that is concealed in the depths of all souls. The divine life is not something imported into human nature from without, as we have shown in a previous chapter, but is there already as the inmost ground of our being. And complete separation from God would be an annihilation of individual existence. This divine element of the soul expresses itself in worship, not necessarily in the pomp and ceremony of cathedrals, but in the devout silence of adoring love in the sacred stillness of the soul, the hallowed solitude of our own hearts. A genuine religious life, when left to act for itself without obstruction, will create its own forms of manifestation. It is a law of our being that all the feelings of the soul tend to ultimate themselves in some outward expression. To confine all religion to a stereotyped form, and to limit its manifestation by the enclosure of a liturgy, is to deposit die life of Christ in a sepulchre and lay a stone upon the door of it, which can be rolled away only by an angelic influence. With regard to the instinctive action of the mind, one may remark that it is intuitively true that whatever is perfectly natural is divine. This is self-evident. If we admit God to be the author of nature and the ever-present force whoso uniform action constitutes the laws of nature, and to live in harmony with what is divine within us is healthfulness, holiness, or wholeness. If there is such a thing as the voice of God in man, which you may call, if you will, the dictate of nature, it is found in that range of mental action which has been denominated instinct. Here God speaks as plainly as on the tables of stone. The word comes from the Latin and means inwardly moved. But it is the divinity within that is the moving force. We may then say in the language of Pope, and reason raise o'er instinct as you can. In this it is God directs, in that it is man. There is in nature a divine, intelligent life. What we'll call instinct is the action of this intelligent, living principle. The actions commonly denominated instinctive are exhibitions in a wider form of the same creative energy which molds the various organa of the body and maintains them in their integrity and functional activity, in which we have called preconscious mental action. This intelligent life in nature impels the bee to construct its cell, the beaver its dam, and the bird its nest. In plants, it is the controlling influence in their formation and movements. So marvelous are the phenomena exhibited by plants, so similar to what we see in animals, that Empedocles, among the ancients, and Darwin and Dr. Percival, in more recent times, have supposed them susceptible of pleasure and pains, emotions, and ideas. Descending to the mineral kingdom, we still trace the action of an intelligent life. In man, besides all the instincts which he has in common with animals, it is seen to coalesce with his voluntary powers and rises to the highest exhibitions of artistic genius in music, poetry, painting, architecture, and every department of mechanical skill. It even becomes intuition and an interior, divine word. But in each and all these cases, it is the operation of the same intelligent life and thought that govern nature in her three grand departments or kingdoms. As an eloquent writer and accomplished scholar has said, God is the organizing framer and preserver of the world of living things. Instinct is the method by which his energy takes effect. It is the general faculty of the entire living fabric, underlying and determining all activities which transpire, either invisibly in the organs themselves, or is played forth to observation, thus hearing the same relation to the general structure which the constructive chemical forces bear to the crystal. Instinct, in a word, is the operation of life, whether promoting the health, the preservation, or the reproduction of an organized frame, or any part of such frame, and whether animal or vegetable. Instinct, says Dr. Mason Good, is the law of the living principle. Instinctive actions are the actions of the living principle pervading and regulating all organized matter. It applies equally to plants and to animals, and to every part of the plant and to every part of the animal, so long as such part continues alive. Viry affirms that internal impulses of life constitute acts of instinct in plants the same as in animals. The distinguished physiologist, Dr. Laycock, remarks, inherent in the primordial cell of every organism, whether it be animal or vegetable, and in all the tissues which are developed out of it, there is an intelligent power or agent which, acting in all cases independently of the consciousness of the organism, and whether the latter be endowed with consciousness or not, forms matter into machines and machinery of the most singular complexity with the most exquisite skill and of wondrous beauty for a fixed, manifest, and predetermined object, namely, the preservation and welfare of the individual and the continuance of the species. He also affirms that this wonderful principle exhibits a knowledge of all that is known in human science, in chemistry, electricity, magnetism, mechanics, hydraulics, optics, acoustics, far transcending the limited knowledge of the human intellect. This intelligent living agent that presides over the construction of organs directs also in the use of the organs constructed. This intelligent and benevolent principle and force, call it by what name you will, Brahma, Osiris, Zeus, Allah, Jehovah, is the life of God in nature, which perpetually creates and unerringly governs the world and all it contains. It was said by some of the ancient philosophers, God is the life of brutes, he is also the life of every vegetable organism, from the lichen on the granite boulder to the Washingtonian gigantea of California. Virgil somewhere says that the bees have in them a portion of the divine mind. Addison, in The Spectator, declares that these intelligent operations which we call instinct come not from any law of mechanism, but are an immediate impression from the first mover, and are only the divine energy acting in the creature. Newton, in a scholium to the Principia, considers the actions of animals, and the same would be true of man so far as he is an animal, as the constant, direct, and immediate operation of the deity himself. Lord Brougham, while admitting that this doctrine exhibits the finger of God as perpetually working before our eyes, and that it brings us constantly into his presence, respectfully, and, as it seems to me, unsuccessfully, attempts to combat it. Either Christian theism or atheism is true, as there is no position that is logically tenable between them. In concluding the discussion of the subject of instinct, I desire to call the attention of the reader to one remark. This divine principle always acts towards a given end, the highest health and happiness of the individual. It gives an impulse as certain in its action as the law of gravitation towards the right use of the organs it constructs. We should examine the depths of our inner consciousness to find this divine propulsion or tendency and yield to it, as pointing by the finger of God in the direction in which wholeness and health lie. With this view of it, Fichte says, "The highest within me, independently of consciousness, and the immediate object of consciousness is the impulse. The impulse is the highest representation of the intelligence in nature, an unperverted instinct being the operation of the divine life in man, and including in it the highest intelligence to point out the right way, and an impulse to walk in it, is the most unerring guide to health and happiness. It could become to us as the clue of Audiobook to conduct us, in our bewilderment, out of the labyrinth of disease and trouble, if we had the faith and courage to follow it, and if our spiritual vision were not so blurred and clouded as to render it difficult for us to discern it."